everybody, this is Caitlin here, and welcome back to Card Game Wednesday, the day of the week where we enjoy all things card game related, and we have got some things to unpackage here and to talk about. Last week we had like a little bit of a sneak glimpse into what the last part of Raid Cluster is going to be like, but I'm going to go back and we're going to be doing a little bit of theory discussion today. It's been a little while since I've done a theory discussion in regards to the characters / plot of this crazy story that we enjoy in Force of Will. Half the time I have no idea what's going on, but I am so interested in most of these characters and whatnot. I've got an invested attachment to a lot of them, as you can tell from previous videos and whatnot. So this time around I am actually doing a video discussing who do I think is the Time Spinning Witch. Now obviously the set Time Spinning Witch came out, but we never actually really got to see who she was. We've seen little glimpses of her silhouettes draped in darkness, and always seem to be bringing on rain with them, but we've never seen like a clear vision of what she actually looks like. We've only seen this kind of shadowy, murky kind of silhouette / shadow and whatnot, so we don't actually really know what she is, who she is, where she comes from. But I'm going to try and take some clues or some kind of context things to try and link in my idea as to who I think she actually is. Now, starting off here, going by her general appearance, she has what seems to be quite an older body. She seems to be at least like a older lady. She has very, very long hair. So long, in fact, that it seems like when it gets to her shoulders, it splays off into all these like individual threads and whatnot. And it kind of reminds me a lot of like a spider's web or some kind of trap and whatnot, because her hair just seems as if it has a life of its own. It's flying off in all directions here. Some of it's draped around her like body and whatnot. It's curling up in front of her as she walks. It seems to be, like it's got a life of its own. Also, in terms of colours that seem to be associated with her, the only kind of couple of cards that either reference her or make use of her artwork are a black and a blue spell, respectively. I believe one being Black Tears, and I think the other one, I can't remember the name of the blue one exactly, but it's got something like to do with the Time Spinning Witch and her call and whatnot. So very interesting that she seems to be associated with the colours blue and darkness. Finally, my last point here that I want to make before I move on to some of the bigger clues and whatnot is that notice how in both artworks featuring the Time Spinning Witch silhouette and whatnot, there seems to be rain in both images. What does rain imply? It implies to me some water and whatnot, but that seems to be like the strong connotations here. We've got darkness, we've got the blue and the black, we've got this very older looking lady. She's got, quite a nice looking form. Not really too much detail on her dress, but it looks as if she's got some kind of two sashes tied to her wrists, or like two pieces of long cloth and everything. Now, what is the thing that is kind of connecting her to what I think she's going to be? Well, one of the biggest clues I feel like comes with a couple of the cards that came out, which seem to either indicate or support the character who I think is. Now, last set there from Advent of the Demon King, we had the appearance of Ayu, a were-rabbit. Now, people remember back in the days from Grim Cluster, were-rabbits were mostly associated with the character of Kaguya, who, if everyone remembers correctly, was a goddess. She's connected to the moon, she's connected to water, but she's also connected to time. The appearance of were-rabbits in both Advent of the Demon King and in the Time Spinning Witch gives me strong belief that actually the Time Spinning Witch herself is going to be Kaguya. Now, what kind of form is Kaguya taking here? Because obviously, recent players would think of Kaguya as the younger, kind of Sailor Scout looking girl or whatever, like, the poster child from the Moonlit Savior and whatnot. But if we go back to basically Kaguya's earliest artwork, which is from the Moon Priestess Returns, specifically her J-Ruler side from her ruler, I believe, or it's one of the rulers or whatnot that does actually flip over. But her oldest art here does share a lot of similarities to the silhouette that we have of the Time Spinning Witch here. Kaguya's hair, when she's kind of older, it is, it's very, very long. It seems to like splay out in all these different strands and whatnot, similar to the Time Spinning Witch herself. Her kind of kimono / robe or whatever has very long kind of cloth / sleeves, or mainly around her wrist area. I think this is mainly to do with her 12-part kimono and whatnot, or her Technicolor kimono, whatever the actual term is. I remember the additions for way back when. So it does harken a lot back to her original appearance, which was from the ground cluster, but some would say, oh, Kaguya doesn't really look like that anymore. Well, if we go back to her artwork from her most recent ruler, which was part of obviously the Lapis cluster, there she became a blue and a green J ruler, and she did basically assume a form that was very, very similar to her original form. Obviously, people remember in the story, Kaguya was reincarnated after she had to banish or seal away all the Cthulhus in Grim Cluster. She was reborn again as like a younger child and whatnot, and she grew up with Feasting and Zero. And while she kind of differentiated a little bit from her original incarnation, because her hair was bright purple and she had like a really Sailor Scout kind of anime look to her, when she kind of realised her potential, when she kind of remembered who she really was and what powers she actually had, she basically blossomed into this kind of grown woman, and she seemed to be more reminiscent of her older reincarnation, with the longer hair, the huge long sleeve kimono and whatnot, wielding like a giant crown on her head, and very similar to the artwork for the Time-Spinning Witch. Her hair is going off in all directions, it's flying around and whatnot. She has the long sleeves on her wrists. She seems to, like, her kimono looks more like a dress in this one, and even though the Time-Spinning Witch's dress is more form-fitting, I can easily see this if it's not being, like, billowing in the wind or splayed out and whatnot. I can definitely see it looking a bit more form-fitting if it was, like, not flying around with the wind and whatnot. But I think one of the biggest arguments for this, in terms of why I think it is actually Kaguya who is the Time-Spinning Witch, is one, also an association with her and were-rabbits, but also the colours. Now, the colours associated with the Time-Spinning Witch so far we have seen are black and blue. Previously, we seen there in the Time-Spinning Witch cluster, we had 3 Resonators who were basically characters that we've seen before, but they all shared a common trait in that they, on one side, they were one colour, and then when they flipped, they became a different colour. Scarlet, aka the girl with the cherry and whatnot and everything like that, she, on one side she was red, and then she flipped into a darkness. Same with Scheherazade, she was green on one side, and then she, or rather, I think she was darkness on one side, and then she became green. And the same with Emil, who's basically just evil Lumia and whatnot. So my idea is, perhaps the Time-Spinning Witch is actually Kaguya, but she is Kaguya from either, now this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because you can argue that there are 2 options as to where she comes from. The first instance is that this Kaguya is from a timeline where when Alhamat killed Feasting, instead of going along with the heroes and whatnot and trying to help stop Lapis or help stop Gil Alhamat, after awakening her true form and whatnot, she chose, instead of to help the people in the present, she chose to go back in time to stop Alhamat for basically getting the power that he would have in order to kill Feasting, which is one option I believe. Or the other option is, after the entirety of Lapis Cluster was finished, because we never got a conclusive ending to it, we just got, hey, evil Yggdrasil's gone, Grim and Pandora died, Lapis is seemingly defeated, and that was basically it. We never got a proper conclusion. My other theory about this is that this Kaguya here is one who, after the final battle is done, she feels lost, she doesn't know what to do with herself. She may have avenged Feasting, but now she's left behind because now it's just her. We don't really know what's happened to Zero after that, whether she's been taken control of by her dark heritage or whatnot, but it feels as if maybe this Kaguya could have gone back in time after defeating Lapis and figured, I need to stop Gil Alhamat from killing Feasting. How do I do that? I go back to the point where he became Gil Alhamat and I defeat him. Now that would be a reason as to why she would maybe be a blue and a darkness J ruler or ruler, because I feel like the Time-Spinning Witch is actually going to be a ruler in Winds of the Ominous Moon, because there is hinting towards the moon, there's hinting towards a breeze, which is kind of playing into the memory of Feasting and the fact that Kaguya used to be able to use wind. But I feel like because we obviously had 3 rulers or whatnot who were one colour on one side and then darkness on the other side, which was a running trait for the 3 of them, we are missing one who is basically blue on one side and then dark on the other, and then we wouldn't have one that's kind of mono dark on both sides, because that really wouldn't make sense unless you include Rhea. So the one who is missing is one who is either blue on one side and flips into dark, or starts out dark and flips into blue. Some would argue that we've already had a blue colour or blue black dual colored ruler from Lapis Cluster, which was Valentina. But again, we saw that they're willing to integrate some new ideas and whatnot, and she doesn't have to be both colors when she flips. She can easily just be one color, as we saw with Scheherazade, with Amiel, and with Scarlet. So that's why I've got some strong feeling that this is the reasons why this time-spinning witch is potentially Kaguya from the timeline where Gel were basically killed feasting, Lapis was defeated, but she is left with a great amount of grief and she wants to try and make amends. She doesn't want feasting to die for good, she wants to try and save her life when she was unable to, when she wasn't as powerful, but in doing so, she has become corrupted, she's become dark and twisted in her mad attempt to try and save feasting's life. Now, it does say that she's going to clash with Rhea and not with Gil Alhamet, which is very, very peculiar in my eyes because obviously we have the Lost Tome starter deck, which I believe is meant to take place after Rhea Cluster has finished. So if that's the case, it would imply that either the results of Rhea Cluster mean that Gil Alhamet is still going to become a, Gil Alhamet, essentially. Gil the Conjurer will become Gil Alhamet. There's no stopping that from happening. From that, I feel like maybe it's implying that Rhea in the end is going to win against the Time-Spinning Witch. It does specifically mention Rhea is going up against her, not Tigris or Shayla or Kirik or even Gil himself. Gil seems to be going off on his own journey, whatever, slowly becoming one of the greatest evils that Force of Will has ever known. But it seems to be that the fight now is between the Time-Spinning Witch and with Rhea. So it gives me a strong indication that that might be potentially what's happening. Also, it might even give a reason as to why Rhea eventually becomes Zero, because we did see the artwork from the poster previously with Scheherazade and Rhea, and some deals seem to be happening. If perhaps Rhea became Zero, because it is pretty much almost practically confirmed, I feel like, that they are one and the same person, how much force would that have behind it, knowing that in the past she has had to face a grief-stricken version of Kaguya and she would never know or understand the reason why. Heck, Kaguya might, or the Time-Spinning Witch might look so different from Kaguya once she reveals herself, she would never know, and obviously depending on the outcome, she would either 1, go back to her own timeline, or 2, she would disappear for good. But because she's an immortal, I feel like that she wouldn't disappear for good, since she's a goddess and whatnot, and she has control over time. But that is kind of the reasonings why I feel like the Time-Spinning Witch has to be Kaguya. The only other character who has been related to time in the slightest is Flute, the Dragonoid that we got Echoes of the New World. And I highly doubt that this is going to be Flute, because obviously Flute, not to insult her or anything like that, she is pretty much a lolly dragon. She looks pretty childish and small. Even then, if this was some kind of grown-up version of Flute, the hairstyle is all wrong, there's no horns, there's no tail, nothing that's, goes with Flute really is signified in the silhouette of the Time-Spinning Witch. Yes, there's some water because of the rain, but Flute was more like, her imagery was like hoops, circles and whatnot, kind of space imagery, and even though, she's more to do with time, she was more dragon-looking, I feel like, than Viola and Viola. She had, horns, she had, a little tail and whatnot, and she had, the symbol on her forehead, so I feel like this is definitely not going to be Flute. I have the strongest inkling here that this is going to be Kaguya, based on the evidence that I've given, also plus the fact that, were-rabbits and rabbits in general have made a reappearance into this world, which I feel like strongly hints towards this is going to be Kaguya. This is going to be basically be evil Kaguya that we saw. We had eviler Scarlet, basically, Nyarlathotep, and we had evil Charizard, and we had evil Lumia, which is Amiel. So I feel like now it's the turn of evil Kaguya, and maybe that will bring everything full circle, and after the end of Winds of the Ominous Moon, we'll be going into basically the Lost Tome story, and then it will be going back into Grim Cluster, and it will start the story all over again. Also, there was also a mention that there's a character that's going to appear in Winds of the Ominous Moon who is going to be part of the next cluster. Whether or not we're now going to, because a few posters have been put out for Winds of the Ominous Moon, and one of them in particular was quite interesting in that it had a fairy on it, and if everyone remembers, fairies really made their debut in Alice Cluster, which kind of hints at Atarathia getting another return. Whether or not that happens is a whole entire video on itself, but yeah guys, let me know what you think about this theory about Kaguya being the Time-Spinning Witch. Do you think it's another character? Someone was saying that they thought that it was actually going to be Valentina, but I argued that Valentina has never done anything with time specifically, so it wouldn't make much sense that it would be her. But let me know down below if you think that it's a character that we've seen before, whether it's an entirely new character not related to anyone else that we've ever seen before, or what do you guys think? I'd love to hear your suggestions down below, and I'm not quite sure what will be for next week's Card Game Wednesday. I am thinking it will probably be me talking about some deck tech or whatnot, maybe like giving some inkling as to what I'm going to play for London GP, but I still need to plan it out ahead of time, guys, and figure out what I'm doing for that. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below as always, like and subscribe, and I will see you all later. This video was made possible thanks to patrons like Houston Moore,